To store the entered values, we create an import query. An import query writes the entered values back to the database. That turns this model into a fully working budget model. So we go to Define and add a new query. We call it Save WORKDATA, and this is an important query. I choose the mode Replace because with Replace, existing values are overwritten with the latest input. That is useful when budgets are revised and resaved. Since I want to store the data in WORKDATA, I select the dataset WORKDATA. This name is just a convenient label, but I like to keep it simple. Once I click Apply, I enter the definition of the import query. Here, I define how the save action works. What we do here is map the columns from the model to the fields in the target datasets. So first, I define the target fields. For company, I use the selected company. Then I also want account name, although I later want to refine that, so I only store the general ledger information. For company, I use the selected company. Then I also want account name, although I later want to refine that, so I only store the general ledger account information and not the full display name. We are not using cost centers or projects here, so I leave those fields empty. For version, I want to store the values as budget plus the selected year. That means I use the selected function, which allows me to reuse values that were selected in the model. In this case, I use a selected year from the year selector. Then I define the source, because I want to know from which model that this data was stored. Since we already have another profit and loss planner, I name this one Planner 2. For item, I use the account key, because I'll need that later to retrieve the data again. The settings field stays empty. For WORKDATA itself, I use wrap. Wrap packages values back into a structure, so they can be stored correctly in editors and import logic. Here, I choose the fields I want to store, which are the budget field and the planner field. Those are the editor values I want to save, so I can retrieve them later. Next, I also want to make sure the item key is robust. I do not want to use a full account name as a lookup key, because if the name changes, the lookup key changes too. So instead, I use concat and split to build a more stable key. With concat, I combine the selected company and the account information. But because I only want the account number and not the full account name, I split the account text and take only the first part. I do the same for the item field, because in this example, that key follows the same logic. And finally, I define the replace criteria. These criteria tell XLReporting which existing data should be replaced by new input. In this case, I want to replace to use company, budget year, and source. So if those match, the existing record is replaced with the new values, and that completes the save action. After saving, we can already test it. The test values are stored correctly. But although the data is now saved, it is not yet being loaded back into the model. That is the next step.